Hey guys, my name's Eternize. In this video we'll discuss 5 habits that every producer make that is likely to have a negative effect on the sounds that we produce. These are habits that I've been struggling with for the longest time and still am, but since I've gotten better at eliminating these mistakes, so has my sound. Let's jump into the video. The first mistake is about overusing EQ points. You probably find yourself using an EQ like the FabFilter Pro Q, which enables you to use a ton of EQ points. So in the midst of producing, you won't really think about putting down lots of EQ points to adjust the sound to your liking. You'll naturally just do it because you can. But before you know it, you've put down 10 different EQ points to make an adjustment that only required 1 or 2. And now you're probably thinking, well, what's wrong with that? I use FabFilter Pro Q because it has a super clean and transparent sound, so there should be no issue, right? Well, most of us use this EQ in zero latency mode, and when in this mode, every EQ adjustment will also adjust the phase. So let's say that I wanted to take out some mid frequencies and I was just tapping away in Pro Q3 to get the sound that I wanted. This is what the phase response would look like. Instead, if I were to use less EQ points, the phase response would appear much more natural and it would actually sound more natural as well. Now, I'm not saying not to use EQ creatively, but there is something to be said about generally using less EQ points and broader Q curves when using an EQ. Tip number 2 is to not use counteractions within the same effects chain. So what does that mean? It means that you should not boost a specific frequency with an EQ, and then a couple slots down you subtract that same frequency with another EQ. It is counterproductive and simply unnecessary in most cases. Worst case scenario, if the plugin introduces internal distortion or any type of artifact, this artifact will be introduced twice, which simply makes no sense unless intended. So be done with whatever plugin you're using in the chain and use them once, unless you have to use them more. Exceptions of course do apply when we're talking about sound designing, for example in Hardstyle when we produce our kick drums. But in general, I don't want to catch you with 5 of the same EQ plugins in your chain and each of them only using 1 EQ point. Just stop it. Tip number 3 is to stop over-compressing. Compression is necessary to make music loud today, but it's also so easy to overdo it. Over-compressing individual elements completely eliminates transients and leaves you with a loud but stale sound. Some elements benefit from this, of course, but also a lot don't. So thinking that every sound should be compressed by default is wrong. Instead, you should take the time and identify which sounds actually benefit from compression. I see so many new hardstyle producers thinking that the lead should be compressed by default to make it louder and to make it stand out. But what they don't realize is that the lead is already a solid brick of audio and compression will only combat the goal in mind. Also, over-compressing in general only results in loud and lifeless music without transients, so really the real issue is to find a happy middle ground, where the overall loudness is competitive but still allows transients to come through, because the choices around compression has been done right. Tip number 4 is to stop making every sound wide. If the goal is to make music that sound really big and impressive and wide, the way to get there is not to make every sound wide. I see this question all the time. How do the pros make these huge and tight leads that seem bigger than life? And for the longest time, I've been struggling with this myself. But in reality, the answer is pretty simple. If you want something to seem wide, place it next to something that is very narrow in width. If you want something to seem super transient, place it next to something that is not. If you want something to seem loud, place it next to something that is quiet. You get the idea? This is basic mixing theory, and sure, this is super hard to master, but really what you should be doing is to get really good at deciding which sounds should be super stereo and which sound should be mono or close to mono. So you're saying that in order to make my leads wider, I need to make other aspects of the music less wide? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Try it out, I'm sure it will blow your mind. Tip number 5 is to stop using too many elements. This is one of those things that I've been so guilty of myself. In my early days of producing, I would often have 10 different sounds going on, but in reality you would only be able to pick out 1 or 2 of them. I convinced myself that the rest of the sounds were there to fill up the audio spectrum and to make the sounds in the front seem fuller. Tons of producers complain about not being able to get that loud and clean sound in their mix, and I believe this is the exact reason behind it. I saw this video the other day about a guy recreating a lead of a popular hardstyle track, and I'm not kidding, he was using 10 or more individual synth layers just to get somewhat close to the top lead sound. Then on top of that he added the chords and sub and so on. But 10 layers, guys, that is too much. I can pretty much guarantee you that the original lead was not created from 10 different layers. Every single sound that you add into your project that is not achieving a specific purpose in your track is just noise added and loudness taken away in the end. Let me say that again. Every single sound that is not achieving a specific purpose in your track is noise added and loudness taken away. So be picky about your sounds. Don't add one sound to make another louder or fuller. Raise the volume instead. You don't have to have 6 different uplifters that all contain high frequency information. Pick 1 or 2. Learn to be good at picking the ones that matters. Alright guys, there you have it. These are my top 5 producer habits that every producer should stop doing right away. These are also the ones that have been sticking with me for the longest, but the first step to fixing a problem is to recognize there is one. So I hope these tips were helpful. If they were, please do like and subscribe, that will be appreciated. And I will see you in the next one.